Hello. Today we're going to discuss community agreements for equity, diversity, and inclusion conversations. Presented to you by Monique Christian Long, the ALA Emerging Leaders 2022 cohort for Learn RT. Our objectives today are going to be to define what a community agreement is and why it's important. Also, to look at examples of already made community agreements. And lastly, we're going to talk about applying community agreements during group conversations. What is a community agreement? I found this great definition from the National Equity Project. A community agreement is a consensus on what every person in our group needs from each other and commits to each other in order to feel safe, supported, open, productive, and trusting so that we can do our best work, achieve our common vision, and serve our students, families, or constituents well. Community agreements are important during conversations about equity, diversity, inclusion, and accessibility. EDI conversations can be emotional and uncomfortable. Your goals can't be achieved in a hostile, disrespectful environment. And you can hold people accountable for what they agreed upon when you have a community agreement in place. So, how do we get started? When you're having a group conversation about these topics, you can always start with asking, what do you need from every person in this group in order to feel safe, supported, open, productive, and trusting? Then you can write down the answers all together or in smaller groups. And then you want to prioritize together which ones are the most important. Consolidate smaller topics into bigger themes so that you can have a more concise plan. And then have the collective agree or disagree by using the thumbs up, the thumbs down, or a sideways thumb. And that means that they're unsure about that particular agreement. So then you want to get a consensus on each part of the agreement and then discuss alternatives if someone is unsure or if they disagree. Rather than just saying we're going to scrap this idea because people don't agree with it, maybe we need to figure out an alternative that will help people understand what we mean and figure out a way to make a compromise. Here are some examples of community agreements that you might find when having equity, diversity, and inclusion conversations. You want everyone in the group to be curious and open and respectful. We want to take care of ourselves. This means stretch if you need to, get a snack, have a drink, go use the restroom, take a break if you need to. We want to also have confidentiality. Don't speak for others without explicit permission to do so. And don't share something that was communicated to you in a private or safe space. Having one mic. This means one voice at a time. Next, take space and make space. If you are usually quiet, challenge yourself to take more space and speak up. If you are usually the person who talks a lot in a meeting, be mindful to leave room for the people who are a bit more quiet. Avoid using jargon, acronyms, and industry language. Use inclusive language that is accessible for people with varying inside knowledge. Be aware of time. In addition to making sure that you are concise and brief with the topics that you are talking about, you want to also make sure that if something is already said, that you don't just say it again. You want to be able to understand that the point was made and move forward. There is a phrase called ELMO, which means enough, let's move on. And that might be a key word that you all use when things like this occur so that we're not hearing a repetitive comment throughout the conversation. Speak from your own experiences. Use I statements rather than generalizations. That's very important to making sure that you're not offending people while you're getting your point across. You want to challenge assumptions. Make sure that you are not feeding into stereotypes and things that people may think about you without proof and evidence. So, challenge all the assumptions. Lastly, be conscious of intent versus impact. No matter the intention, you are responsible for the impact. And that's very important because you may have well intentions, but something you say might still offend someone. Be responsible and then talk it out together as a group. So, how do we apply community agreements during our conversations? There's going to be times where people fall outside of our agreement during the conversation, and it's okay for the facilitator to remind the group about the agreements that they made. You don't necessarily want to be aggressive and say, hey, these are the rules, because agreements are not rules. It is a consensus. It's more something that we all need to make sure that we are taking care of each other, right? So, an example of that would be that phrase you used sounded like jargon. Can you explain what you mean by that so everybody in the group can understand? So, by coming with this sort of tone, you're able to not sound argumentative, but actually raise the point that everybody needs to understand what you're talking about. Remember, we agreed upon that. We needed to make sure that we are being clear for everyone. All right. So, some of the resources that I used are here on the screen if you would like to look into community agreements a little bit more. While having these conversations, it's always good to have an agreement like this in place ahead of time or at the beginning of the conversation so that you're prepared for things as they come rather than dealing with uncomfortable situations after they've happened. You already made a plan of action on how to handle it. Please check out these resources if you have any other inquiry about community agreements, and I hope that you try it soon. Thank you.